I am from the future, and all of this goes horribly wrong.
Good morning. Well, no, good evening over here. Good morning. How are you doing, Jeff?
Oh, yeah. Good. Where are you?
I'm originally from the UK, from Manchester, but I live in Bilbao in the north of Spain. I've been here for about like 20 odd years now. Yeah, so
Oh,
yeah.
fab. Oh, cool. I'm working. It's interesting. I'm working on a project for a video game developer who are in Manchester. So sort of used to like popping over to evening meetings for them and morning
All
meetings for
right.
me. Anyway, thank you
Brilliant.
for
Oh yeah,
bringing me in.
thanks very much for speaking to me. I mean,
Of course.
I watched the film just recently ahead of an interview I did with Gore, and I loved it to bits. So
Oh,
good.
good.
Gave the film five
Good.
stars
I'm
out of
glad.
five.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm happy. I appreciate the support. And I know Gore certainly does. He's really willing to talk to, like, he just wants everyone to know about this movie. It's so awesome. Like, just sort of watching him go into like, marketing mode or something.
Yeah.
Like, I know him so differently.
Yeah, and the film, it couldn't come at a better time. Of course, it's
Oh
so
yeah.
timely, so on the nose. I
Yeah.
mean, it's laugh out loud, but it's the kind of laugh out loud that you know you should not be laughing because we are
Exactly. Yeah.
slap bang in this situation. But it's just so much of a mirror that you just can't help
Yes.
laughing at ourselves.
Yeah, no, I know. I love, see, I grew up on that kind of counterculture satire, and here in the States, it would be Kurt Vonnegut novels and things like that,
Sure.
and the punk rock movement and all those things. And this, Repo Man, if you remember the movie from the 80s, was very kind of influential on us for
Yeah.
this. And it's just been, I don't know, just kind of a joy to make something that's not afraid to be dark satire,
Yeah.
at a time when, I think there seems to be an allergy to it almost, you don't see it
Yeah.
so much. So,
Uh-huh. But I mean, because it is so dark satire and it
mm,
plays so much on the humor, but also being so dark at the same time.
yeah.
That must have, I mean, obviously it's fantastic. It must be fantastic for you to get to work with Gore again,
Yes.
but to get
Yes.
to work on something that is so satirical, but so terrifying at the same time because of the situation that we are kind of in at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm quite curious. What's kind of like the starting point from
Oh man.
to visualize something like that? Because obviously, a movie, an action movie, or a whatever you will, I
Hmm.
can't imagine that kind of comes to you pretty not instantly, but a
Right.
lot easier, right?
Absolutely. In fact, this was the first conversation I had with Gore. You brought it up, and I even sort of felt my blood pressure go up because it brought me back to, having written nothing for the movie. He called, the kickoff phone call, and he said I've never made a movie where I had no idea where to start with the music. And I'm sure Gore's also a musician and he writes music, and so he has a kind of an entry point and an ability to talk about music that's maybe, I guess elevated compared to a director who
Sure.
doesn't have that. So for him to say that was interesting, and I did work with him on the first three Pirates movies and Rango and Lone Ranger and a couple other things over the now 20 years, and we really did always have like a starting point. There was, yeah, so it was intimidating because we realized it could be anything, right? The score could be anything. And I with a director that's less courageous, me saying I don't know where to start either is talking him out of hiring me. But with
Sure.
Gore, it's like, great, that's where we're starting, right?
Right.
So the laboratory doors open, and we really, you know, initially started thinking about, like, Repo Man did come up, and movies we liked, and just kind of a musical approach. We talked about Frank Zappa, Captain Beefheart, and punk bands we used to like. So forgive me, I'm from Southern California, so that the roots run deep. and and eventually, I believe the very first sort of notes that were written came from this little angular guitar riff that Gore started playing, actually. And it was, 8 notes, 10 seconds, something, very short. And it came to me as a voice memo. He
Right.
said, I'm thinking about Man from the Future. We're a clock movie. We're a race against time. And I want this cyclical thing. And, do or don't do anything with this, but what do you think? And I took that sort of 3-second piece of music and turned it into a 4-minute kind of wild expansion opus and said, you know, what do you think of this? And he said, I think we have square one of our score, and that's what set us off. So that, and actually, it's the music you hear right when Sam Rockwell walks into Norms. You hear the
Uh-huh.
guitar and literally a ticking clock. Well, it's not literally, it's actually us tapping on the guitar pickup.
Right.
So we were we were very makeshift about how we did the score. It's like if, if it was lying around in the studio, we'd bang on it and see if it
Right.
helped us any. And um, anyway, that's the spirit of the whole score.
Uh-huh.
I mean, forget that I then have to go and write the orchestra. And yes, I know how to command 96 musicians and all of that. I also am not afraid to take out two coconut shells and hit them together
Sure.
and, and scratch on a cello, which I don't even know how to play, and see what comes out,
Uh-huh.
So that was kind of the ethos, was this maybe juxtaposition of the sort of formal, glossy, beautiful orchestra and this lo-fi approach, which is just,
Uh-huh.
very handcrafted.
Yeah.
And
No,
I think
I
I'm
love.
sure you felt.
No, yeah, I love the. I can't remember. I did say when I watched it, I on social media, which what it reminded me of. But it very much reminded me a lot more of kind of 80s movies
Hmm.
than
Okay.
it did than kind of current movies. And that was quite curious
Yeah.
because of how it kind of the humor is parodying or
Hmm.
satirizing kind of present technology, you know. So I'm quite curious how that kind of. I mean, you said there that you were very influenced by kind of 80s movies and things like that, 80s
Sure.
music. But
Sure.
why did you decide to kind of to stick to that kind of style
Well,
for this
yeah, it's
movie?
interesting. I mean, there was never an aim to be sort of trend right. There it
Uh-huh.
never is really with Gore, actually. So that you sort of start by just throwing out the window, whatever's sort of current and trendy and, well, I don't know, correct or something. Um, and you go looking for things. I'm not sure if it was, well, I suppose the DNA of the film does have some of that, like, 80s feeling, because it's kind of the birth of this type of technology in a way. In fact, I
Yeah.
even remember, in the 80s, in fourth grade or something, a friend of mine did a computer program for the science fair, which was an AI, thing. Like, it was one of those, basically the 100 questions where, it would tell you what object you were thinking of by kind of going through a decision-making process of what question to ask you next. Obviously, crude by today's standards, but it was
Right.
still like the beginning of this idea. And I think that ties into very much the synthesizer as an instrument that in its crude early days was an approximation of another instrument. And nowadays it's become this wildly sophisticated, you know, a great music synthesist is as great a musician as, I'll say it, as Yo-Yo Ma is on the cello. There, it is a path that you can devote your life to. I think back when it was a Casio keyboard or something, it was closer to a toy. So I think this all relates to what we're really talking about, which is now we have this technology, AI, which, you know, we have to have a love-hate relationship because it's going to cure cancer and it's going to put artists out of work.
Yeah.
So you have, I think that's what I think was fascinating to both Gore and I about this material, is that no one, I'm not really willing to stand on a mountain and say no AI. You know what I mean? I am
Oh,
willing to
yeah,
stand on a
sure.
mountain and say we need to be very thoughtful about how we use it, because I
How we use it
definitely,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I want it to keep my dad alive longer. I want it to keep I want it to be used for healthcare. I want it to be used to, maybe we have an energy crisis. We have, you know what I mean? There's plenty of very beautiful
Uh-huh.
uses of the science, but I don't want it to. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that old quote that's been bandied about lately, which is, I don't. I'd rather have AI do my laundry for me so I can go play guitar rather than the other way around, right?
Yeah.
So I don't
Got it.
need it to write a song for me.
Uh-huh.
I need it
Yeah.
to tell me if I'm ill and I don't know it, So,
So I mean, you said there that with AI we can't just kind of not use it because it has its
mm,
uses. So I'm quite curious from a musician's point of view. Do you see it as
mm.
a tool that can be used in specific
Uh,
ways that's
well, it's
helpful?
interesting.
Because it's really
I
difficult because
mean,
people say don't make movies with AI, don't use AI, you
yeah.
mustn't. But at the same time, it serves its purpose at the same time. No, would you say
Yeah,
the
it
same
does. I
thing
mean,
about music?
I don't know. It's a fraught topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, to start with, we didn't use any AI on the score.
Mhm, no, sure.
Certainly would have, I don't know,
Well, you've just gone
creatively get an
against what you were saying
opportunity
in the
to do
movie
so.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I've also seen, yeah, you know what? I think the jury's out a little bit, even with using it for filmmaking right now. But I'll tell you one thing: I have seen in my life, the advent of the synthesizer, the drum machine, and samples, and each time the story was this is going to end. Drum machines are going to end drummers.
Yeah.
Samples
Yeah.
are going to end live music. We'll never record an orchestra again. And yet today we are recording more orchestras than ever, actually. Especially when the streaming boom was going on. So, you know, I think that's what I'm saying is there's a way to sort of surf this wave and find the appropriate ways to use these things. I don't know what they are yet. I certainly know what they aren't, which is typically it's a sort of a rage bait headline when people say Hollywood is over because I can now make it look like Tom Cruise is fighting Brad
Tom
Pitt.
Cruise and
That
Brad
came
Pitt,
out
that crazy
recently,
video. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, okay, but that still doesn't look like a movie to me, and I don't. There's a whole lot of daylight between that and a 2.5 hour movie that Tom and Brad make together with whoever directs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I'm not really fully sure what the responsible uses are yet.
Uh-huh.
But I do keep going back to like, wouldn't it be better if it were doing the things we didn't want to be doing so that we could do the things we want to be
Yeah.
doing, which is making films and making songs and having a family and you know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? Like,
So
I
something
don't.
that I do. Sorry, now I was just going to say that something I do appreciate about the kind of this appearance of AI and how it's just getting bigger and bigger, bigger and bigger. As I do speak to a lot of
Yeah.
musicians, a lot of especially British bands and things like that,
Yeah.
and
How are
I
they
prefer
feeling?
that they. What I really appreciate is I write a lot of reviews about albums as well, and quite a few of the most recent albums that I've enjoyed the most have been the ones that have felt most humanistic with imperfections in the
Right.
music, a squeakier
Isn't it interesting?
guitar or certain things
Yeah.
that don't. And those for me are what I don't know. I appreciate music much more that when you can tell it's not,
Yeah.
it's by people, you know?
Yeah, I could not agree with you more on that front. And I think, look, if you listen to the guitars in this movie, you'll spot plenty of roughness. It's more Rolling Stones, less Def Leppard, if to use an
Yeah,
analogy. Although even that, it's still it's still human. It's not synthetic. So you still have, I don't know. Yeah, I'm forever moving the microphone 2 millimeters this way and that to get the right amount of squeak because I do want to hear the hands of the musician, and I I work very hard at trying to capture that. I also, yeah, as a composer, very aware that anyone on my street has access to the same software now. There's no real gatekeeping involved. Every
yeah,
sampled orchestra costs the same amount to anyone who uses it. It's not that much. And so you can now do an orchestral mock-up, but then when you go and record it with the orchestra, you have something that they don't, that the person next door doesn't have. You
sure.
have that recording. So I actually think we're going to see, and we already are, it sounds like from the bands you're talking to, a trend toward um not to use the word trend, an appreciation, I would say, for the human element, the
Uh-huh.
very specific thing that, every band you've ever loved, you've loved it because they have that bass player and not that one. And
Yeah,
then when you go over to that band, you love them because of the way those six people play together,
uh-huh.
what have you. And that I
Excellent.
think is far more interesting than loading up a preset and
Uh-huh.
everyone's playing the same chords into the same computer,
Yeah, well, I think that's the same with all kinds of art.
Yeah,
Art with a perfect art isn't perfect art to me. Art with
absolutely.
imperfections is the perfection of art for me now.
Right, right. Well, that's, look, with Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, I think we're showing humanity in all of its very, very messy,
Exactly.
you know, we're all
Which
a
is something we
disaster in
don't get to
some
see
way.
in the movies, especially Hollywood movies,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, not at all. You don't, there's a lot of kind of rounding out the rough edges, and I think, we really, Gore and I early on decided we were not going to round out the edges. If you listen to the guitar ticks, the amp is buzzing. And we
Yeah.
went, well, there was one day when I cleaned it and listened to it and said, I can't even send this to him. It's not our movie anymore. Never mind. Right. Because we have the technology to clean that buzz out. But no, I want to hear I like the sound of the chord going in, and I like,
Uh,
I like the sound of, there's a reason why I played at some of the cello parts, and then I had a professional play the ones that needed to sound professional,
right.
and the ones that didn't sound like a human being struggling with an instrument they can't play, which is exactly what it is, and it's exactly what I wanted it to be. So,
Well, good
yeah,
to hear.
there's an
Yeah.
embrace of that, of
Oh,
that.
brilliant, brilliant. I'm quite curious. I mean, so obviously you mentioned that it kind of all started with a little bit of a
Yeah,
riff on a guitar.
little one.
Um, but what from there, how do you build
Mm.
where you go? Do you kind of is it more focusing on the story, the scripts, the specific character? Because there's so many different kind of quirky,
Yeah,
disparate
I
characters in
know
this film.
it's also
All
chaptered,
of
right?
those
So
things.
yeah,
Where do you start? Where's which is the kind of the starting block to kind of lead you in the right direction?
right, right. Well, so not so much the script. Here's what I find as a composer: there's a danger in writing to the script because when I read it, I make the movie in my head, but then the director makes an even better movie because they know how to direct.
Yeah.
So if I get sort of down too far down the path of what I think the movie is, and it turns out it's not what the movie actually is, um, then I've sometimes hard to kind of right the ship. So I not from the script, but from the film itself. When I really started, let me think about this. We probably had about a third of the movie in very rough editorial shape. So I didn't have a chance to watch the whole movie. So we did have the opening in norms, and we had some of the end where entering the one of the AI chambers and of the room where there's a boy in it, and a couple other scenes, and that was what Gore showed me to get started. It turned out we started in Norms just because it was the beginning of the movie, but we didn't really finish Norms till very near the end either. It was a place we went back to, so that little guitar riff is in there, but it was quite a lot of detours. Um, but it is intimidating to try to go like, well, this is the small section, and how are we gonna go out to something wider? Um, Especially when we were still finding our footing. But all the music is written to really to the story, which is in a way to say the footage, right? So I
Yeah.
know who Sam is, Sam Rockwell. I know whose character is going to be, and I can see who our villain is, and it's a very interesting villain actually. Um, because it's sort of like there's a personification of the AI, but there's also this kind of AI encroachment into the world in many different ways. And then you have, the group, the kind of band of people that are coming together to try and stop it. And they have these sort of chaptered flashbacks, which are quite sectional, in the movie.
Yeah.
So there's also these little vignettes almost. We go into seeing, Ingrid's backstory. We see Susan's backstory, and those have to be all treated individually. So I'm not sure I fully answered the question because,
Yeah, more or less. I mean, I
yeah,
guess those vignettes that you mentioned, those kind of different
hmm
perspectives, I guess those you had to kind of specifically focus on the characters involved in those
yes,
sections,
right,
and the kind of because they're very different in tone because of the different kind of personalities of the different people involved in
right,
those stories,
right.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say for a good example would be Ingrid's flashback. She's a very important character in the story, and we go back and see, she has an allergy to Wi-Fi, right, which is part of her character quirk and why she can't actually enter the modern world in the same way that the rest of us can, and how that actually, in a way, is an asset to what how she experiences the world. So we had this very short piece of music that begins in norms. If you remember, there's a bottle of hot sauce that sort of spins and
It's
points at her
around
and
and
says,
yeah,
"You're coming this time."
right.
And there's this little, it's a wine glass, hooting sound that plays this little melody that gets expanded in her flashbacks. And then you see what her job is. The only job she's able to have is to work with children because they don't have phones, right? Because she
Right.
can't be near a phone. So
Yeah.
she becomes, a party princess for the kids. And of course, as parents start giving their younger and younger children phones, it starts encroaching on her ability to even do that. So we have that story that's pretty contained little mini episode. And from that, there has to be a piece of music that's going to apply to Ingrid in the present day and all the other various
Sure.
parts in the film. So once that music is written, it can then be applied. She has some pretty important action sequence moments later in the film, and she's a catalyst for some of the. I'm trying not to be too spoilery.
Yeah,
She's
oh
a
yeah, sure. Let's go out to there. Yeah,
yeah, she's a catalyst for some huge important events in the movie, and that all comes from that backstory, so which was done beforehand. So in a way, that helps us do those stories. And then Mark and Janet, who are the teachers, they have more interaction with the teenagers who are kind of dealing satirically with a phone addiction of sorts. And that music again is written in their little bubble and expands out into the kind of wider, bigger, more set piece moments with the teenagers. So
uh-huh.
I guess in a way that is how we did it. We really had to kind of focus in on the flashbacks and then bring it back out to the present day.
Right.
Generally
Uh-huh.
speaking, that's how the score was constructed.
I'm quite curious about kind of because I imagine all of the actors didn't have your musical cues when
No.
they were in the film. So do you know if did either yourself or Gore give them any specific musical cues kind of to listen
Oh,
to help them kind of get in their head what it might sound like
interesting.
while they are on set in in the film?
Yeah, do you know that's an interesting question. I don't know that it ever came up with Gore. So I'm afraid I can't answer. I would love to
Right.
know. Now I'm curious.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll
No,
text him
because
later.
quite a few
But
actors do say that they listen to
I
specific
know,
types of music to kind of
right?
get into
I
the
wouldn't
zone,
be
right?
surprised if they did,
Yeah.
right? But in fairness, yeah, I don't actually know how that all came down. But I wouldn't be surprised, especially Sam. Just thinking of the norm sequence because it's so choreographed. It's not, I know we all know Sam Rockwell is a very good
No,
dancer,
but
but
but it
this
is
is a type of
so
dance,
well
right?
choreographed. But not just so
Yeah.
Sam, but that the camera work is there is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
phenomenal. So it just
Yeah.
makes his monologue just so perfect, so good.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy for you to recognize that when you saw it. The reason I bring it up is I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of musical element involved in, helping
Right.
really Sam and all the other patrons, and even the camera movement is very musical, very dance-like.
Yeah.
But I can't say with any certainty if there was music on the set. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. But also, one is, I mean, because it deals with kind of humor and it's not horror, but horror about what's going on now. I'm quite curious if there was any specific segments of music that you decided to go against the grain, so that it went exactly in the
Hmm.
opposite direction you would expect it to typically go,
Right.
because of the kind of
Yeah.
tongue-in-cheek, pitch black humor.
Right. I mean, well, let's see. One thing I thought of is there's a sequence where Susan is grieving the death of one of her child. Um, and that it's not that the music goes against that, it's just that it's wildly different from the rest of the film because the sequence is designed to be, I mean, earnest. It is truly about loss, and it's about, you know, I guess it's a tricky sequence in a movie like this because so much of it is satire and we're allowed to be sort of enjoying the moment, but this isn't a moment to do that. So it feels I don't know, earned and probably earnest to what she's going through and true to the actual moment of the story. And then very soon after we get into the satire of what the aftermath of a school shooting looks like if we take it too far and remain this complacent about what's actually happening when those events occur. So there's elements like that. I think we were definitely playful with the way Sam, like I would say, motivates the troops. He addresses the troops a couple times, and I love Gore was always saying, the future doesn't have Arnold Schwarzenegger to come back and protect us. It has Sam
Yeah.
Rockwell in a trench coat and with makeshift cyberpunk gadgets attached to it. We don't know if we can trust him. But that's all that's left in the future. This is our only hope. Is this
Yeah.
person, and so you know, there's an idea that if he comes back and he's the guy that's got to motivate the troops, what does that actually look like? What does it sound like? And we're doing a very intentional homage to, like, let's say Patton by way of Sergeant Bilko or something, or
Yeah.
by way of Captain Beefheart even, where you hear the drum and fife music while he's trying to
Yeah, it's very
motivate people
military,
in
but at the
norms.
same time, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not. it's not trend right. It's not what you expect to hear in that moment. It was a little more like what would he be thinking? What does he think he's
Yeah.
doing right now?
Uh-huh.
And so in his mind, he's sort of Patton motivating the troops, He's or it's I mean, you can think of so many great war movies. Braveheart has a great, where we're all sort of, gathering the troops, and here's what we got to do. We got to take that fortress, and all we have are these toothpicks. It's sort of like, what does that absurd concept look like? Because you know, there's it shouldn't really look like there's a chance that this is going to work. The six people in a Norm's diner in LA are going to stop AI from destroying the entire world is totally implausible, right? It's absurd, and it should pull you in to make you go like, okay, we're having fun now, you know.
Yeah.
But in Sam's mind, he's deadly serious. So
But that must have been really, really difficult to kind of capture that sure self-assuredness, but
yes,
the craziness that he think it would work out at the same time. I mean, to juxtapose those two things at the same time must have been
sure.
quite a
Yeah,
thing to get
I
your head
mean,
around, no?
you know, yes, but I have the tremendous advantage that Sam Rockwell is playing the character, because he's extraordinary. You know what I mean? He's extraordinary every time he does anything. But the man from the future in this film is really an iconic performance from him. Hard not to be inspired, and hard not. You know what it is? It's the eyes, because there's this little thing where, like, I'm thinking of a moment where he's talking to the crew and he's saying, I'm not expendable. The entire this whole thing falls apart if I go. And they say, but what does that mean, we're expendable? And he does this thing with his eyes, which is like, well,
Yeah,
you know that already, don't you? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's sort of it's just this tiny little twitch, and that to me is it's enough. And it's also in the motivational speeches when he's like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Everyone gather together, and he's got this like, come on, everyone, and not everyone's with him, and that's what I love about it, because he's just so like, he's charging in with a bucket over his head and a broom, and he turns around and the army's 2 miles behind him. Kind of that's kind of the whole character to me, and I think it's inspiring in a musical way, because you can really be pretty absurd with it while still being earnest, if you see what I mean. Like, it's it is genuine, you know, how do I put it? It's drum and fife music written to be legitimate. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's not really like it's not doing that parody thing with music where you go and like play the wrong note on purpose or something like that. It's actually quite earnestly written. It's just stylistically unusual, I guess would be the thing for 2026. So,
But before you got that, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you wouldn't mind. I mean, you've directed the orchestra and things like that, but you also
yeah.
wouldn't mind bringing out coconuts and things like that. So I'm quite curious. Were there any kind of unexpected experiments that came to
Yeah.
fruition while
Well,
you were making
gosh.
music for this one?
Yeah, we got Gore to grunt into the microphone in a couple spots. It's not like a featured element, but it's in the DNA of some of the mall chase sequences with the guys with the masks. Um, but this is the kind of thing that, I don't think I'd ask Steven Spielberg to do that if I were scoring his movie. So that's what I mean. There's something very unique about
Yeah.
working with someone like Gore, who's willing to like literally roll up sleeves and plug in a guitar. There's that. I remember when we recorded our vocalist, Brianna Lee. She sang these incredibly high notes. Or it's also in that mall sequence, and they were really just sort of done. We had an idea of what they'd be, but we didn't know if they were possible. And when she came in and sang them, blew us away. So we ended up putting them in a couple other spots. So that's sort of an experiment that it's actually, to me, that's a very 60s sounding vocal. It reminds me of like, oh, I don't know. I'm thinking of Exotica records, even like Esquivel or the original Star Trek TV show theme had that big, uh ethereal voice. It's in that zone, and it's sort of like I haven't heard that type of thing done in this sort of style in a long time. I'm hearing a lot of vocals in shows these days, but nothing that just goes decidedly 60s, not present day, idea. Um, what else? We the guitar pickup tapping was an experiment that worked. There's the upright bass, which is also very underutilized instrument, but I got a friend of mine. He plays. He's a rock bass player, but he plays upright as well. He kind of plays it like with a punk attitude, and I thought this is interesting because it's not sophisticated jazz where you're not going to hear it, in the Kennedy Center or something. You're going to hear it. This is just a guy like going for it on his bass, and it's so rugged. What else? Ilan Rubin, who's our drummer, he's this is like a week before he joined the Foo Fighters, actually. He didn't get that news yet. He was
Right.
about to go on tour with Nine Inch Nails, and we're like, we better get him quick. And then he did, and 2 weeks later they traded drummers. So, but he played drums on this, and there's an electric cello near the end, which is doing basically guitar dive bombs, like it's sort of very 80s hairband metal excess, all added to it. Just all gets added to the soup.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Well, listen, they give me I know you've got to go a hard wrap in 5 minutes or so. So just to finish off,
Yeah, sure.
what I mean, obviously you've got this coming out now, but what other projects will we be
Yeah,
hearing music from
yeah,
you
that's
in the future that you can talk about?
sure, sure, sure. There's two. There's actually another. It's quite fun. Festival darling, thriller comedy horror movie called Bad Haircut. This is about. I cannot believe this hasn't really been explored before in comedy horror, but it's about an evil hairdresser. So, if I'd say just that, you can already imagine like the danger you're putting yourself in when you get a haircut from this person. Anyway, that's a great, great, great deal of fun. And that's been doing festival circuit, and I think
Right.
we'll see where we get distributed, but it will happen, I'm sure. And then on the flip side, there's a video game I was talking about earlier called Squadron 42 that's being made in Manchester. It's part of it's the parent game is called Star Citizen, and that is a crowd-funded game by this legendary developer. But I have to say, we've now crowdfunded just under $1 billion. So I believe we're the biggest game in production next to Grand Theft Auto 6. Um,
Really?
Yes, and in fact, a couple of weeks from now, I shall be at Abbey Road recording an orchestra for some of
Wow.
this. It's a big order. It's ultimately 10 hours of music, of which I've written probably 8, and we've recorded about 6 of it. So we're sort of in the process in the next few months of wrapping that up. Very long project. I've been on it for over a decade, actually. But we're coming out this year. So in that space, it's not I don't really work on that many video games, so this is kind of an
Yeah, no,
interesting one
yeah,
for
because
me.
I was looking on kind of like what you'd worked on before.
Mhm.
Yeah, I hadn't seen many video games
No,
listed.
and it's sort of by chance. I'm very much enjoying it, but it's a sort of a different thing, a really slightly different mindset. But musically, that one's very sort of straightforward. It's a sci-fi space opera in the vein of a Star Wars or Star Trek. But it's let's see, I would say musically, well, actually, it has to make a lot of moves musically as well because of how long it is. But generally speaking, we have the big orchestra at Abbey Road for some of the score, which is very much in line with. Uh, I would think of it in a way, sort of like a World War II movie about the Air Force, because
Right.
it's very much, you're a pilot and you kind of move your way up through the ranks, and ultimately we are saving the universe. But there's still a kind of a love of flight, and that's, I think, really the catalyst for the game even existing. The designer Chris Roberts, who made a bunch of video games in the 90s called Wing Commander and the 2000s, he's making it, and obviously his sort of passion his whole life has been this type of sci-fi extension of that what we have is like humanity's love of flying, and just the joy of that discovery. So yeah,
Amazing. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much
that's coming up.
for your time, Jeff. I really appreciate it.
Of
Thank you
course,
so much for
Howard.
the score. I mean, I'm a big reader, so
Oh,
I like to listen to music that's not got any lyrics. So I've been listening to
okay.
I've been listening to it back to back, back to back, over and
Very
over. So it's
good.
fantastic. Yeah. Thank you
Good,
so much for
thank
your
you, Howard. I
time.
appreciate the time. Yeah, I
And,
appreciate your time too and your
I
interest.
hope to speak to you again sometime soon, sir.
Your entire lives have been building to this night.
It's gonna be okay. Or it's not. I don't know.